Evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world. Is once again time for 10 to 1, the internet's favorite movie centric list making podcast. Wow, I keep forgetting how loud that intro is. Um, I am one of your hosts, Josh, joined by always as the list mistress of them all, Jen.
Oh, I like first of all, I like the sound of that.
The
List
listress.
mistress has let's try say that 10 times fast. I guarantee that'll chirp you up. But about the volume of our intro, I think it's to wake you up so that you know there's something good coming. If it was low, had little bits of, violin and cello in it, I feel like you probably wouldn't be as excited. So I'm all for the loud intro.
I'm awake. Didn't expect to be awake, but here we are.
Sometimes you just have to get your priorities straight. I mean, there's putting on a podcast and then there's sleep, and sometimes the two just don't coincide well together. So I'm
That's
glad you
exactly
chose.
right.
Yeah, I'm glad you chose the right priority. That's good.
Me too. It's been a minute, but here we are. Glad to be back at it. If you were one of those people listening to the Wadcast number 164, which officially doesn't exist anymore, uh,
Oh, no.
then you'll know I plugged the show about you know what what the list was this week. There's been uh, an audible call at the line. That's a football reference, but it's not about football. This list isn't about football. Rather than
Although we
uh,
could do one about football because there's been
one or two
a f
football movies, yeah,
yeah, there's been a couple. Yeah, so I'm sure
that
we
that
can come up
will
with
happen in the future. But we
we'll
truth
call
be
it
told,
10 and 20. We'll call it first and 10. Okay, never mind. Sorry. Yes.
that's beautiful.
Continue.
That's beautiful. The thing is, for we 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 weren't like scheduled to start at a specific time, so we've basically spent the last hour and a half uh doing the thing we would normally do at the beginning of the show and just talking.
Chit-chatting. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can skip all that stuff because from what I understand, and I might not have been listening at all. Who knows? Jin's doing great. I'm doing great. I can't lie to you people. So the
We
list.
definitely have that. Yeah, we definitely have that going on. I want to make a quick clarification and just kind of a jump. So, the last podcast that we had, in case you are listening to these sequentially, we had decided that this week's podcast was going to be Shakespeare quotes, but that has proved to be a little bit, let's just say, tedious to kind of dig through a bunch of movies and find those things. So we decided to go big and bold this week and do dun 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 robot movies. And
Robots.
robot movies are, I have to say that from mostly from a science fiction standpoint. I mean, I guess there are some movies that don't sort of reach into that. Um, I'm sure that somebody will post a movie about their, you know, Roomba or something. Um, that doesn't seem so science fiction, but mostly they run on the sci-fi line. And there have been some amazing robots. For just a second, though, I wanted to sort of think a bit about what it is that makes a robot, because we've got a lot of different sort of quasi uh, descriptors here. Like, is an android a robot? Does a cyborg actually count? What is your definition of a robot, Josh?
It is an autonomous machine that has. I mean, it could have humanistic features, but I don't think, at least in my list, anybody is trying to, at least not initially, in some replicate uh, like a perfect human analog.
So Judge Dredd in this particular universe of robot, of the explanation of robots, Judge Dredd actually wouldn't fit. Is that, am I on? Is that correct?
I would not put Judge Dredd in the um, robot category. I also wouldn't put RoboCop in the robot category because he's more
See, that's interesting.
cyborg.
That's interesting. Although, honestly, there is a case to be made for RoboCop being put into our favorite robot movies because there were other robots in RoboCop
Yes,
which could technically work. But I tend to agree, although this sort of is why I was saying, like, this is one of those issues that becomes a little bit difficult because anytime that you make something sentient, you usually have tacked on the human element. I mean, that's sort of how we measure what is sentient, right? Does it behave like a human?
right.
And it's pretty interesting because a lot of science fiction movies that are about quote unquote robots are actually explorations of uh, what is the word sentient, what does it mean, where do we stop with the boundaries, where do the boundaries start, and how do we kind of embrace all of that. And the one that kind of comes up for me, which I actually have on my list so I won't mention it at the moment, um, sort of did this in a way that was not unique but unique in the moment, and I thought it was really good. So we'll see where some of these land. um and I'm interested to see where things kind of open up for you. So on that note, why don't you start with your lower five, and then I'll give my lower five, and then we'll go into uh, our top fives, kind of on our own.
Sounds great to me,
All
and
right.
I think some of them will be surprising.
Hmm.
So here we go. My bottom half. My number 10, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Number 9, this might get a chuckle out of you. Space Camp.
Hmm.
Number 8, uh, 2021's Finch.
Oh.
Number 7, Wall E. And number 6, and this might be sacrilege to some, Bicentennial Man.
Oh, see, now this is exactly what I was talking about. This is the kind of thing that we are trying to explore. Most of the time when we're talking about robot movies, unless you are, um, well, I've got a really good video game that's out right now, which sort of is in that same vein. Um, I don't know if any of you have ever played Helldivers, but Helldivers is very much like that with its, basically you just plug human consciousness into robots, into, mecha, and then you're off and fighting. And this is one of those super interesting ideas behind robot technology that it has always interested me in science fiction, but it's not technically what an actual robot is. So yeah, that's kind of, I feel the same way about RoboCop. Like, that's implanting human sentience into something else, but it still makes them human, right? You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's is super interesting. I have to hear though, for each one of those bottom five, can you just tell us what the robots are in each one of those?
You're asking me what now?
So for the bottom five of your movies, can you let me know what are the robots in them? Because, like, I was struggling with two of them. Where are the robots in them?
Okay. Sorry, I was making sure the socials were all plugged.
Oh.
And when you do that, you suddenly you start listening to the show. And yeah, so I'm like hearing two gens, asking me questions.
I'm
Um,
sorry.
okay. In Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, they built robot replicas with kind of, you know, parts laying around with the help of the universe's greatest minds. And yeah, there were some robots from the future, but those aren't the robots I'm talking about. I'm talking about the shoddily built ones, the ones that are just super cool. That kind of look like uh, they were put together in someone's garage. So that's Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Space Camp. There was like this cool little robot that didn't do much of anything. It was just a cool little robot from 1986. You know, and it's like really the only thing about that movie I really remember. And I used to be one of my favorite movies. Weird. So yeah, the cool little robot in Space Camp. In Finch, well, the movie is about sort of a post apocalypse. Tom Hanks is really just kind of doing the whole movie solo with this robot, right? And he did a tremendous job playing against um, a robot. And well, of course, we've seen him do a great job against, playing against a volleyball. So something a little more animated, probably not as big a challenge, but it was it was a very poignant. I think that's the right word. Poignant film about two, well, one survivor and one kind of inheritor of the world,
Hmm.
more or less. Where's my list? Number six, Wall E. Well, Wall E, his curiosity about the world and the people that inhabited it after everybody left is just so darn adorable. And Eve is also a really cool robot, but I give it to the titular character as far as who I would be talking about if the movie made higher than my top five, or yeah, made it into my top five. And of course, Bicentennial Man, um, Andrew. Robin Williams is
So
fantastic.
yeah, I think Bicentennial Man is definitely that definitely fits the it it fits everything actually. So that's perfect. Um okay. I had a question and now I completely forgot what it was. Hold on.
Sure.
I had a question about one of them, but I totally can't remember now what it was. Shoot. I got sidetracked with something else. It'll come back to me.
Was
Let
it
me
the
go through my
Space Camp robot?
no, although I do know what robot you're talking about because I also have seen that movie, so it was kind of interesting. Um, oh, I know what I was going to say. What I was going to say is I will bet you that I can guess your number one movie. I won't say what it is right now, but I'm pretty sure I know what it is.
I would not be the least bit surprised if you did, but I have to say I'm well. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. I'll try to I'll try to remember to say what I think it is before you get to your number one.
I think by the time I get to number one, and you're like, I haven't heard it yet, you will know.
I'll be like, "Hey, pretty sure I know where you're going." Okay. All right. Okay. So, the one of my movies here is gonna require a little bit of explanation, but the others probably not. Um, and and just so that we're very clear, um, my number 10 pick, depending upon how you look at it, may or may not work. I don't know. Um, I went back and forth on this because I felt like, oh, maybe it kind of breaks the exact thing that I was just talking about, but I chose the Iron Giant. And the reason that I hesitate with that one is because technically, I think the Iron Giant is like an alien presence from some other place. So maybe it doesn't quite work. But the
Alien
framework of
robots are still robots.
the Iron Giant, yeah. I mean, because then I'd have to cross other stuff off my list. But the Iron Giant is definitely a big freaking robot. Sorry to everybody else that's coined that phrase, including the website that I love. Okay, my number 9 choice is a movie that's called Death Powder. If you don't know this movie, which I highly doubt you would know this movie, I was talking to Josh with it prior to our podcast. Death Powder is a Japanese film which was a very low budget movie that came out in 1986. It is so much body horror. It's almost a little bit, I'm just going to say grotesque. I loved it though. I mean, I absolutely loved it. It marries two things together that I absolutely adore. However, the theme of cyberpunk and body horror make it an extremely difficult movie to kind of get a good feel for. And I won't go into, everything about it because it's in the bottom 5 of my list, but I will say that this is definitely, if you can get your hands on it, one of those movies that has become a little bit of a cult classic with people that are into horror movies, and it is so worth watching. It's crazy. It's absolutely upside down crazy. My number 8 choice is a movie called Chappie, which really should have made it into my top 5, but I had so many cool movies in my top 5 that I decided not to. Chappie is basically, it's a robot. It is a robot that is sort of like going from uh its infancy into adulthood and all of the things that become problematic about that. Chappie is such a great robot movie. My number 7, I'm sorry, my number, yeah, no, my number, this is 7. Um, my number 7 movie is a movie called Virtuosity. It's one of the first movies that I ever saw that really treated um not just AI, but also the idea of virtual reality as something that was definitive, that like had boundaries to it. And this movie was released in 1995, so many years before real virtual reality was sort of a thing that you could really participate with. And it's quite good. It takes on a cops and robbers kind of a thing, but the person who is at the core of being the serial killer is technically from virtual reality. It's quite cool. I like it. And then another movie that I really wish could have made it into my top 5, but yeah, it's got to stay down here. Sorry, is Transformers. My Transformers pick is the original well, not the original Transformers, but the Transformers that kind of pulled off the whole beginning of the Michael Bay universe, which I have, my issues with. But I still love the concept and the effects of the Transformers that kind of coined everything onto the big screen and made it so universally appealing to so many people. So, Transformers, Virtuosity, Chappie, Death Powder, and the Iron Giant. So those are my bottom 5.
Interesting choices. Some of those would be in my honorable mentions,
Mm.
but it doesn't seem like there's any crossover so far.
This is a pretty
Interesting.
wide swath of movies. So if we don't have crossover, I sort of feel like that's okay. I mean, okay meaning like there's just so many movies out there that this could uh that our description could fit. I mean, we didn't even narrow it down to like robot movies prior to or whatever. We just said
Yeah,
robot movies. So
yeah, robots in general. No killer robots, no friendly robots, just robots. It could be
it's
anything.
pretty wide open. I mean, a Godzilla movie almost made it to my list, and
Same.
I I couldn't because I just didn't have room. But yeah.
There's a couple on here that no. you might be a little surprised, or at least maybe you didn't think of it. And there are some that are omitted that might even be like clear omissions, but I guess we'll find out as we go through our top five. Do you want to start or do you want me to?
Um, well, go ahead. You can start.
Okay, my number five in our favorite robots debuted for the first time. I guess that's what debut means. In a little movie in 2008 called Iron Man. And
Oh.
I bet you're wondering, is this fool about to say Iron Man's a robot? No, of course not. But the 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 character, the 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 robot that clearly stole every scene that they were in was was
Oh, are you asking me?
yeah,
Um, oh, why did you have to do that?
because I forgot.
Um, uh, Iron Man's oh man, I just had it in my head and then you asked me and then I was like, oh, cuz oh god, the moment that you said it, I was like, "Oh, I know who that is." Um, it's the it's the guy that is what's his name that damn it, what is his name now?
Jarvis.
Jarvis. Jarvis.
Yes, and we got to see a wonderful debut of what was essentially just
Ultron is who I was thinking. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Ultron is who I was thinking because basically that's sort of how Ultron evolves. Ultron evolves from Jarvis. So I'm so sorry. Okay, go ahead.
when we see Tony Stark, working his long hours in the garage, I guess, and he has these interactions with this, robotic arm, and when you see for the first time that it's not like an infallible piece of machinery that does everything perfect,
Right.
and Tony Stark's like, "No, that's not it," and the arm just like droops and
Yep.
like feels shame. It's like this is wonderful. This Marvel cinematic thing might turn into something, and that how do you take something without a face and give it emotion? Well, that's what they did, and they did, I think, a great job doing that. I kind of wish I had my notes up for this, but because I have notes up for everything else, but I was like, it's Iron Man. I'll remember Iron Man. Yeah.
it it's funny because I actually have a friend who instead of having Siri's voice has a voice really similar to Jarvis and absolutely loves it. Somehow that gives them more command.
I was I'm still not sure if um like the arm and the voice are part of the same, because Jarvis runs basically everything.
They have to be. The AI has to be. Uh, it the AI has to be part of that. Even if that early Matrix was, let's just say, enhanced, the beginning AI has to be a part of Jarvis altogether. I don't see any other way around that.
Okay, good, because like I said, those scenes with the robot arm as they're trying to put together the like second gen arc reactor, it
Hmm.
was delightful to say the absolute least. And I think that alone is what made it worth my number five spot. So I guess we'll call it Jarvis plus you know extensions of for my number five in the Iron Man movie.
Nice, very nice. I'm uh, I'm not I mean, like, I have lots of questions, but I feel like that's actually really good. Okay, my number 5 is a little bit more straightforward. And yeah, these guys are definitely like some kind of I don't know. I guess they'd be aliens. I don't know. I don't know. But they're still robots. Um Back in, oh gosh, I don't know what year this movie came out. 88, 87, maybe 87, 88. Um there was a movie called Batteries Not
I
Included.
knew it.
Yeah, and I just flippin' love this movie. I don't care how many times I've seen it. It's Steven Spielberg, which I think has something to do with why I love it so much. Um, it has Hume Cronin, it has Jessica Tandy, it has a bunch of people who are all together in this unit, this housing unit that is supposed to be condemned and torn down. And they all collectively are refusing to move. Even though there's, money that's trying, there's a strong-handed villain that's trying to like push people out. And then there's these little tiny robot guys who appear on the rooftop in sort of like a pigeon roost, and it's, of course, Faye Riley, Jessica Tandy's character, that ends up being kind of like the mom to them. And she's having her own struggles. Her brain is definitely going through some dementia, but she also has this uh, kind of mental block about her own son. And the two of them, Frank and Faye, own this little cafe underneath the dwelling. So these robots come in, and there are all kinds of ways that they interact with the tenants. And I swear they go through like, the many stages of grief in order to come to acceptance about who these guys are and what they can actually offer. And I have to say that there is something both magical and wholesome about this movie that just brings me back to a time when movies like this were still being made. That I don't even know if you could make a movie like this today. I just don't know if there would be enough interest in it. But it is truly, it gives me good feelings to watch it. There's nothing about this movie that doesn't sort of make me feel like, oh, you know what, there's hope for humanity, even with these additional little guys that are clearly robots that are trying to make the world a better place too. I absolutely love this movie. There is something so spectacular about watching mechanized mechanized beings being better than humans actually are striving to be, which is sort of this big message altogether. I'll let you decide what kind of the final message is, but it's pretty brilliant. I absolutely love this movie. It is definitely worth a top 5 spot on any robot list. It's endearing, it's wholesome, it's family friendly, it's everything. It's just mm, perfection. So, batteries not included gets my number 5.
It would be on my honorable mentions. So there's that.
Well,
That
that's
is a
good.
really
I
good
mean,
choice.
glad that we're simpatico there.
Well, my number 4 is probably one that is not widely known, if we're being perfectly honest here, which we always are. It is a movie that came out in 2022. I think it was 2022. Yes, 2022. And it is directed by Jim Archer.
Hmm.
The movie is called Brian and Charles.
Oh, I have not seen that.
Then I won't go into spoilery stuff because, well, that would be rude. Not that we do that much anyway, unless it's like a really old movie. What happens is there's this guy, right? His name is Brian. and he's an inventor, and his stuff doesn't work. He's just terrible at it until he invents a robot, and the robot is, you know, it gets smarter. It becomes his friend, and I'll leave it at that. Because there are some, twists and turns, because that's how you tell a story. Um,
Hmm.
the robot names himself Charles. And I think that's fair enough to say because the movie is called Brian and Charles. So Charles is, you know, like a lot of movies about robots, trying to kind of figure out where he fits in. And he looks like a refrigerator with a mannequin head on it. That's kind of the gist. It's like big boxy body and very fake looking head. It's, well, because it's a fake head. The point is, they don't, try to do this. Well, we can just draw some lines on an actor's face and boom, robot. No, they built this contraption to make it look like it was something that was, that's going to be sort of a theme in some of these things. The robots look like they were kind of thrown together, and I don't know if that says something about me, but it is in a couple of the movies. Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey coming to mind from earlier. But it is a very heartwarming story about friendship and um, connections, as well as discovering your own potential. I absolutely adored this movie when I watched it. I'd been looking forward to seeing it ever since I started seeing adverts, trailers in our local independent uh, theater, Sunray, which, for those of you listening at home that haven't heard the news, is going to be shuttering its doors because a property developer from Georgia just bought the building that it's in and will not be renewing the lease. You bastards. Sorry if you're listening to the kids, but
Damn.
it's awful. It was our last independent theater in town, and it's just terrible. It's the only place to watch movies like Brian and Charles. It's the only place to watch, your friends with their, the movies they produced it, and the ones that you get a chance to actually act in, the ones that are made here. But I digress. Sunray Cinema should not close. I mean, Brian and Charles is a wonderful movie. This show totally almost went different direction. Brian and Charles is my number 4 because it is a delight. And I don't want to say it's a triumph of independent cinema, but it is definitely one of those movies that makes you curious about what indie films are up to these days.
Mm.
Brian and Charles.
It's funny because when I first saw um um okay, wait, what was the name of the movie that I saw? When I first saw um oh, I know. When I first saw Real Steel, which I did not put on my list, although I could have, I guess it was pretty good. Um, but when I first saw Real Steel, I thought it was an indie movie, and I think that it kind of reminds me of something, and that is that there is this idea, um, which I think rightly so gets sort of thrown around with movies that involve robots. Either the robots have to be so sophisticated and so over the top that the level of CG makes them really crazy. Looking at you, Pacific Rim and stuff like that. Although I guess Pacific Rim don't actually count; those aren't specifically robots. Kite. I don't know, but anyway. Or they sort of are gritty and like you were saying, the robots look like they're thrown together. Um I feel like we don't often land in the middle. It's either one or the other. A couple of years ago, many years ago actually, there was a Disney movie called Robots, and it had some great voice talent in it. But the robots were like they were caricatures. They were what we do sort of when we do anamorphic stuff. We basically took human traits and we turned them into robot material. So, different ideas about how we think about different personality types became those robot types. Um, and in movies, it seems like this is a really calculated thing that we do. In Real Steel, which was not an indie movie, but it felt like it had that gritty feel to it. Like, oh my God, they just threw this thing together. And it worked really well, but I never would have guessed that it was like so much that the bottom line budget was so much. So yeah, just had to throw that in there. Um I'm definitely gonna put that movie on my list though, because I feel like that could be a really good movie to watch now. So I will stick it on my list and I'll let you know what I think about it after I watch it.
I win.
Yeah. Okay, my number 4. My number 4 movie that I had such a hard time with placement on this list. Like, I feel like it's all upside down because none of these movies are, like, more important to me or kinda speak louder than other movies, but I had to put them in some semblance of order, so this is what we got.
Heard that.
Yeah, I guess this is a tough one. Um, there's just so many over the top good stuff in here. Okay, so my number 4 is a little movie called The Matrix. And this idea of the machines in like capitals, the machines, is so incredibly advanced in The Matrix that it almost feels like there isn't an actual embodiment of the machines. Although that is at the heart of what it is, man versus machine. um and part of the reason is because in order to placate the humans, the machines come up with this elaborate simulation, and the elaborate simulation will really only allow humans to, or machines that are interfacing with the simulation, to look like humans, like Agent Smith. And it's such an interesting concept to me that it really was something that I hadn't ever thought of before. And I mean, like, I say this sort of, okay, well, maybe my imagination isn't that good or whatever, but this idea that the simulation is so incredibly developed that we just simply wouldn't notice is so realistic when you really stop to think about it, and it absolutely makes sense. I mean, like, more so than I feel like I want to admit, because none of us want to admit that we live inside of a matrix. But also, the more sort of we move forward with science and advanced theories, the more we're sort of stuck in this idea that, hey, the whole universe might just be a simulation. And that boggles my head and hurts my brain in apparently ways that I just don't have enough synaptic responses to be able to fathom. But it's an amazing concept that bears just a little bit of thinking about on the surface, especially because of our absolute love at the moment. And I do mean love, like we are having a moment of love affair with uh, AI and robotics. And the two of those things together will get me to the next thing on my list. But this is an odd pivot point in our history where our science fiction is not only becoming science fact, but things that we once thought were ridiculous have become more and more uh, maybe it's not so far off. Maybe there is a plausibility to some of these things. And the Matrix is definitely in there. There is something about the world being controlled by code that absolutely makes sense to me. And, I'm a programmer. So, okay. Give me that. I do sort of see the world in code anyway. But there is something amazing about this concept that just absolutely had me hooked from the day that I saw it. And I've seen this movie, I don't know, probably 10 or 12 times since it came out in what, 1999 or something. It's amazing. I absolutely love it. The original, there is some kind of magic in the original Matrix that, although the other Matrix movies add to the universe, there is something spectacular about the original Matrix that just yeah, it just gets it. So, my number 4, The Matrix.
It's because we're living in a simulation.
Yes, I feel like that is where I just don't have enough synaptic power to be able to process that reality. It I can touch it just barely and then it flips away and it goes, "Nope, you're not allowed to be there." So, apparently it's back to Dungeons and Dragons for me because somehow magical thinking is more realistic to me than the idea that we are living in a simulation. So, yeah, there's that.
I brought this idea up with some kids. Not that I was saying, "Oh, we're living in a simulation," but the idea came up, and or was it an adult? I don't remember. Everybody's all the same these days. Um,
What is age?
Basically, they said, "Well, if this was a simulation, I wish there were cheat codes." And I said, "How do you think so many idiots became billionaires?" And they were like, "Oh,
So, okay, so I'm gonna process this out one more, okay? Because I've thought about this as a story before, about writing this out as a story before. So, things that we consider to be a divine intervention, or things that we consider to be synchronicity, those would be your cheat codes. Your cheat codes would be things like um, the most improbable happenstance ever. And you can't see the cheat codes before they appear to you, but they do appear to you. And then if you take advantage of them, that gets you ahead in the game. But I do have a fundamental issue with this, and that is, and this is why I think the Matrix is so cool, there is no winning at this game. I mean, the simulation is not a game. The simulation is just a simulation. It's a it's a methodology for existence. It is absolutely not a um I mean, game, I guess, is a good way to say it, but there is no competition in it. We have created competition within the simulation in order to exercise our own brains, but the simulation exists outside of human understanding, and I think that that's why I have such a hard time sort of collectively pulling it all together, because the simulation isn't meant to be understood, it's just meant to be accepted. And that's a tough one because I don't do well with that. Um, but if you think about the universe as an entity, then it starts to make more sense. And if robots are doing all of this, then it becomes more implausible because robots are a human construction, not a N not outside of the human. We can only experience things that we can express to other humans, right? We can't really give someone the understanding of what something is like without making it, well, it's like this. And that's why we use robots to explain so much, because we don't have the ability to say, this is what it this is what it is. Yeah?
yeah." I just know one thing: if I start seeing The Sims, playing The Sims in game, I'm going to start freaking out.
Whenever I hear somebody say that's so meta, which people don't say so much anymore, but whenever I used to hear that, um, That's exactly what it reminds me of. It absolutely reminds me of that. And in D&D, there's actually, you have meta magic. You have this whole idea of sort of understanding things inside of an understanding, which it just defies explanation altogether. There's so many interesting aspects to this. And I hate to say it because it kind of goes against the grain of what I actually believe here, but if AI helps us understand what AI really is, then maybe that will make us better people. Because then I think we can back off from giving AI so much power. But as it is right now, we're just happily throwing vast amounts of resources into artificial intelligence and saying, here, instead of Jesus take the wheel, AI take the wheel. See what happens. It's a little frightening, a little bit, just slightly. Again, this fits so perfectly in with my number three choice. So now you can guess what that is. But what's your number three choice?
My number three choice is my favorite movie from 2021
Oh,
because it has a lot to do with robots in it. And I know what
I
you're
see.
thinking. What could his favorite movie from 2021 be? I'll be honest. It surprised me as well to know that this was my favorite movie of 2021
I
because,
mean, I didn't even know that there were any robots in, you know, Barbarians. Wasn't that your favorite movie of 2020? It's not.
it's not, I'm like, I don't even know if I know what that is. Wait, is that the one with Justin Long?
No,
Which
uh
one was that?
Barbarians is the one with they are staying at the Airbnb and they discover in the cellar that there's
Yeah, that
actually.
has Justin Long in it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize his name. My bad, my bad.
The guy that was the Mac in the I'm a Mac and I'm a PC
Yeah.
commercial
Yeah, 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 yeah.
with
Yeah. See, when
John
you put it in that
Hodgman.
context, then I get it.
John Hodgman, come on the podcast. Anyway, I sent him an email. He hasn't responded.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Anyway, digress. My favorite movie of 2021, The Mitchells versus the Machines.
Oh, see, I definitely guessed that that was going to be on your list because I
It's
agree that's
such
an
a good
excellent movie.
movie, and
Yeah,
there are no shortage. There's no shortage of robots to choose from, but I think the two, yeah, two, not just one robot, two that really stand out are Deborah Bot 5000 and Eric.
mm, good choices.
Damaged during a battle with the Mitchells. They just try to convince the Mitchells that they're human. Like, we're
Which leads to a
total
lot of
human.
hilarity. A lot of hilarity.
What's your name? Deborah Bot 5000. Voiced by Fred Armisen, by the way. And he's like, what's your name? Eric. That's a human name. And that was Beck Bennett. These two robots in this like almost apocalyptic, you know, animated film about the rise and takeover of AI and robots uh, are they provide such wonderful comic relief in a movie that is a comedy. They stand out as the comic
Definitely.
relief, which I think says a lot. As these two robots, like I said, the big shtick, the funniest moments are when they're trying to be like, yeah, we're human, even though they clearly are not. Because the robots in this movie, they don't look human. They don't act human. They're just kind of helper robots until they're not.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, these two sort of become part of the family, and yeah, I guess that's a little bit spoilery, but it's hilarious. If you haven't watched it, watch it. I was so surprised that at the end of the year, I was kind of going through the films and the scores, the ratings that I gave them on letterboxd.com. Give us money. And it was shocking to see, holy cow, this was my highest rated film of the year. This
Wow.
cartoon that came out on Netflix that I had seen no advertising for, saw no promotion for. It was just there. And I was like, oh, this seems cool. And once you get to the credits and you're like, wait, Lord Miller produced this? Of course it's going to be amazing.
Hmm.
And it absolutely was. So my number three are the Deborah Bod 5000 and Eric from The Mitchells versus the Machines.
Very good choice. Excellent choice, actually. Okay, my number three, as I just alluded to before, without any further ado, is the Terminator. This it kind of fits directly into the theme that I was just talking about, which is the kind of scary sentience that we. I don't know. So, I mean, right now, at least in terms of what we understand, our AI is not sentient. I mean, we know that. Although it's amazing how many people really sort of believe or are lulled into this idea that like their Alexa is a real person. Um
I
things like
always say
that.
please and thank you to Alexa.
You know what? So do I. So do I. And that I think says more about who we are as people than it does anything else. But it is not I, I never think of Alexa as like a member of my family or something. That's just, no, obviously not. An important tool in my household, yes. Um, but it's funny to me that we are assigning more and more human qualities and traits to our robot friends than we ever have in the past. And a jump back in time to Terminator, I think is yeah, sometimes the easiest way to explain why there is this nervous energy around uh AI can really be captured in this. Now, Terminator came out in 1984, and it is so the reason that Terminator becomes sort of convoluted is because it includes time travel, okay? And time travel is adding a secondary layer of infinite difficulty to an already very difficult idea. The AI in the Terminator becomes aware. It's called Skynet. If you haven't seen this movie by now, yeah, what are you doing with your life? Um, it's classic James Cameron in one way, in the sense that it sort of builds a box and then deconstructs it. So you become fascinated with the entity that is the Terminator, but you are absolutely rooting for the humans to be who they are and able to overcome. Um, but it raises so many questions about how the robots in Terminator became who they were because we gave them that. We gave them that power. And like I said, now when we think about AI, we don't think about the possibility that it's going to become sentient. But I have to say that you don't have to have something being sentient to take control of entire systems, entire world ending systems. And it leaves me with a really weird feeling. I think that Terminator was the first movie that I ever saw that made me like actually question not the time travel piece because that's I don't know. I've always had a complicated history with time travel. But it's the first movie that I ever saw that really made me question the idea of automation as perhaps not exactly what we think it is. Like we love the idea of automation to make our lives easier. But what if, in the struggle to make our lives easier, we actually create our own destroyers? Like, it's, man, it's pretty big. It's a heavy, heavy, heavy topic. And it's amazing that a little movie like The Terminator could bring so much to the table the way that it does. But yeah, it definitely always makes me think um, in sort of the best science fiction way possible about this whole struggle to be human and what are the threats to being human. And really it's kind of like a look back in the mirror, like, well, the threat to being human is what humans do with their own humanity. Do they pour their effort into making humanity better, or do they pour their effort into making things that are going to eventually rise up and destroy us? It's kind of difficult. But I mean, there's just something so classic about Terminator. So Terminator gets my number 4 spot. I'm sorry, gets my number 3 spot.
Yes, it gets your number 3 spot. And I'd seriously considered Terminator 2 specifically,
Mm.
because Terminator 2 is one of those rare movies that, kind of ups the ante and just does it better. Um,
It definitely makes the Terminator, but it also takes away the threat. I mean, not that it takes away the threat completely, because there's still something out there, but it takes away the it strips a layer out of the story, which I feel like the original Terminator does a better job of. So enjoyability wise, I think T2 is probably a better movie overall, but just in terms of story, yeah, Terminator gets it for me, especially if we're talking about robots.
I can see that, and you are more prone to lean towards horror
Yeah,
than
this
I
also,
am.
yep, it's definitely a darker movie. The Terminator is a much darker movie than T2.
I think that was during a time when, and I'm going to say it again, the original Terminator is made very much like a horror movie with like an unstoppable force chasing after
Absolutely.
the final girl.
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah, excellent choice there. Yeah, people probably tune in to hear us fight about, you know, which ones are more deserving, and here we are, like, hey, buddy, great choice.
That's because that I think that that's because in this range, the ability to like some of these movies is so, and also I can't overstate this enough. You and I are such big nerds that we definitely pull along the same lines with this. I can see that. I can definitely see that. Like, I still think I know what your number one movie is.
I'm not a nerd. You're a nerd.
Yeah, well, I wear that badge with pride. I am a nerd,
Yeah,
and
me
I'm
too.
pretty happy with it, actually.
I'm a nerd and a weird dad, just as John Hodgman states. Is you know what? No more about that great man, John Hodgman. Come on the podcast. So
Ah,
my number 2.
number
This
two.
is uh you know this almost made my number 1, and I am I almost I almost regret my placing of it. But then I realized what my number one is, and I'm like, no, there's clearly no other option. Uh, And it seems like you know what that is. So if my number two is not the thing you think it is, then definitely you nailed it with my number one.
All right.
So my number two has a brain the size of a planet, and he's forced to take prisoners down below. Talking about Marvin from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, super awesome.
The
Marvin is the only
the
depressed robot out there. He's yeah,
exactly
yeah. Thank you, Alan Rickman, for voicing Marvin because that was amazing.
brain the size of a bloody planet.
Loved Alan Rickman in that role. It was so perfect. Everything from his inflection to his cadence was just that's exactly how I read Marvin when I read books. So, yes, absolutely.
Exactly. And Alan Rickman is never seen, of course, because he only lends his voice to Marvin. But so much performance in that alone with his voice, the muttering, the angst. It's a beautiful,
Ah,
beautiful, exquisite uh, piece of art when it comes to robots in film. And I know the movie has its detractors, people that what, I'm not one of those guys that usually says, "Well, I guess you just didn't understand." Well, I think in this case, maybe you didn't understand. You know, not I'm not saying like it's the greatest movie ever. I'm just saying you know to those that are naysaying it because it didn't stick to the story. It's like, yeah, which one?
oh
The
yeah.
the radio play that it was started out as, the BBC TV version, the books, which by the way were definitely not the the original text of this story. So Douglas Adams, he did this weird thing where he was like, you know what? Every time we do this in a different medium, we're gonna change the story.
Right.
And that's what happened. And I guess someone didn't get the memo when they're like, "But the movie's way different." It's like, yes, because that is always been the idea. Um, but when it comes to parent bringing it back to the list, um, Marvin feels like one emotion, and that is soul crushing depression, and it's contagious. Not in a biological way, but in a oh my god, will somebody shut that machine up kind of way. Uh, Although there is like a place of honor for the Doors, so there's that. Always so pleasant. Anyway, Marvin is the second best movie robot in my opinion. Um, and I will go ahead and say, in literature, the greatest robot ever. Yeah,
That's a
Asimov, I'm
that's a
pointing things
tall.
at you.
Oh boy.
So, my number
Yeah.
two, Marvin from The Hitchhiker's Guide
I mean,
to the Galaxy.
okay. Listen, I know this is a list about movies, and I'm totally going to stick to that with my number two choice. But in the meantime, I am going to say that I Sing the Body Electric is probably, and I know that there's been adaptations of it, is probably my most favorite robot story. Um, and I mean, there's so many reasons why, but it is I'm sorry, not I Sing the Body Electric. What the heck am I thinking? Um that's the poem by Walt Whitman. Um the okay, now it just completely fled my brain and uh Of course. I feel like I am getting old. Okay, wait. Let me. I have to now. I actually have to think about this because although most people associate Isaac Asimov with the iRobot series, which honestly, in some ways, was probably pretty groundbreaking because it gave us the three laws of robotics and things that I feel like at the beginning of a resurgence into science fiction, we sort of based a lot of other science fiction on. Um, it, it it Asimov wasn't the end all, um, because I think a lot of people like sort of don't think about Ray Bradbury. Oh, I know what it is. It's the Electric grandmother. That's why I had electric in my brain. Um, and Ray Bradbury, when he wrote this story, um, that actually had a teleplay that was called I Sing the Body Electric, that was a Twilight Zone episode. That's where I'm getting all confused. Um, the greatest literature character that was a robot comes from, I think, Ray Bradbury's The Electric Grandmother, because to me, this is sort of the best marriage of here's a machine who has given up every single thing that they possibly can for the betterment of the children and then their children's children. It is the sort of like not just the gift that keeps on giving, but this idea about how using technology can further the existence of humanity in the best possible way. So, anyway, I feel like everybody's got their most favorite story when it comes to this, but I had to just throw that in there because it has been done. It's just only been done, I think, uh on TV. It hasn't been done as a movie. Although, God, why hasn't it been done as a movie? Get with it, Hollywood. This would make a great movie. Okay. My number two choice. My number two choice is a movie that everybody knows about, but few people actually really have seen it. I noticed that recently when I was talking about this movie. It fits right in with my horror absolute obsession and love. It's called Chopping Mall. Chopping Mall is such an eclectic film that kind of houses everything. It's got ridiculous ness to it. It's got crazy humor. I mean, the tagline for this movie is "Shopping costs an arm and a leg," or "Shopping can cost you an arm and a leg." Um, and it's basically about this mall that employs this sort of brand new security system, which are these robots which go on a killing spree. And it's the coolest thing. I mean, it's just so out there, and yet at the same time, uh yeah, I don't know, sometimes you wonder about, how improvised technology might become. Like, could it just pick up a chainsaw and work it? I don't know, maybe. Yeah, those kinds of things, yeah, those are the things that keep me up at night. But the movie itself is just like, it's on my list of, hey, there are classics, and then there are cult classics, and then there are just classics that just make sense, and this is one of them. Chopping Mall gets my number two choice for movies about robots that just need to go down in infamy. So, Chopping Mall. And I dare say that you have not seen that movie.
I have not.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
All right, so we're at the moment, and you think you know what my number one is. I can guarantee you know what my number one is, especially since you said it after hearing what some of my earlier picks were. I'm guessing Space Camp in particular stood out.
I think that it has something to do with Johnny Five.
Who's Johnny, you say?
Because, number five is alive.
Well, now I don't have that for a big reveal anymore.
Was I right? Was I right?
My number one, well, I would tell you what it is, but I need input.
Oh, I was right. Wow.
Yes,
I,
Short Circuit. I need
I feel
input.
like I've really grown to know you really well, Josh.
I don't know if that's great.
It's something. That's for sure. It's
It
something.
is definitely something. It is the the single greatest robot movie of the 80s with very poor decision making on many levels, but it was great for for its for its stars,
It
I
was a
guess you could.
product of its time for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, after all, how many times um, can you point to a quality product and say, "Yep, that's Steve Gutenberg."
But I mean, even more than that, like there's so many ethnic jokes and there's so many things that just don't fly today. Um
Like anti-Semitic joke
but
to
but
close off.
but underneath it, it is such a good. You're right. I mean, Short
Fisher
Circuit is such a great
Stevens,
movie.
in wearing makeup to be a man from India. And if you're unaware of who Fisher Stevens is, think about the whitest guy you know and go even whiter.
Yeah.
Which is not to say, he's an awful person, because he's not. He's tremendously talented. And uh, I I don't know. I'm not in a position to, make a judgment call about whether or not, what he did was okay. Um,
It was a
but
different time, and we really this is what progressivism is all about. Progressivism is all about realizing that some things are just really not okay. Um, but we haven't made the social contract to say that they're not okay. And I think that that's sort of where Short Circuit and many other movies fall. They fall into a time before we collectively said this social contract is no longer valid anymore. So, yeah.
here's the thing, though. I watch it every year, and I do remember a point in time saying, "Oh, this wasn't a great decision," and then going, "But I do think it's absolutely hilarious."
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
And I just don't know how to feel about that, to be honest. Fisher Stevens is a very, very funny man. Um, but this isn't a list about, our favorite times, people, you know, did that.
Although
Um,
we could actually make that a totally different list. That would actually be a really interesting list and one I'm sure that we would get mail on.
I'm sure I'm gonna hear something about this. I love Short Circuit because of Johnny Five. I'm sorry, spoiler. Number five, and much like Wally, it's his curiosity of the world around
Right.
him that makes it so fun, because everywhere is sort of like a new learning experience. It's very
Yeah.
quotable, uh, even though the quotes don't really line up to situations you might actually be in. But if you just, pop up with a Nova, you either know what's going on or you don't. And most of the time, people don't. It's such a fun character. And Ali Sheedy doing a tremendous job as Stephanie. And yes, I'm basically just finding excuses to try to do the voice at this point. Um, if you haven't seen Short Circuit, uh, do yourself a favor. No matter what age you are, no matter what generation you're from, give it a watch. And if you find it to be overly offensive, that's fine. I get it, because as we've said already, it was very much. a what do we say? A sign of the times,
Oh yeah, a
a
product of the
product
times.
of the
It was a product
times,
of the times. Absolutely.
and they're it's uh,
Also,
you do.
the oh, go ahead.
I was going to say you do see an abusive um, boyfriend get his comeuppance, so that's always fun.
The person who voices Johnny Five, his name is Tim Blaney. And I've been really into voice actors of late, mostly because of my resurgence and well, resurgence, my resurgent love of video games and wanting to, of course, because I have to dissect everything, get into the nitty gritty of who's doing the voices and how did they come up with this and all those kinds of things. So anyway, so Tim Blaney does the voice of Johnny Five, and he's still around. He also did he's a puppeteer as well, which is kind of amazing, but he also did stuff for Men in Black, and most of the Men in Black movies, as a matter of fact. He did a couple of things for the Muppets. He did, I want to say he did some stuff for SpongeBob. But his his voice acting skill, I think, is one of the reasons that Short Circuit works, because there is something infectious about Johnny Five's sort of naivete, but also there's an excitement in his voice, and it is very much this is hard. It is very difficult to be excited about an encyclopedia. It is really hard, I think, to experience sort of the world through those eyes and make those emotive functions come through, and he absolutely just nails it. So part of the reason I think this works so well is because of Tim Blaney, who really gets no love because nobody knows who he is. And yet, if you do the voice of Johnny Five, he absolutely is that voice. So, yeah, pretty amazing. Pretty amazing.
I would be remiss if I didn't also add that this movie had a sequel.
Oh, yes, that's right. The one that is like, is I think isn't it a New York City one?
It's definitely in the city, and here's the thing: the movie, the original spoilers for Short Circuit. Um, if you haven't watched it, skip ahead like 20 seconds. At the end of the 1986 movie, Steve Gutenberg and Ali Sheedy, ride off into the sunset with Johnny Five, quite
Right.
literally. And no, I guess it was more of a sunrise. But the point is, you know, it ends there, credits roll, and you're like, oh, they're going to live on a farm or something. And the idea of a sequel comes about. And I'm sure someone's like, you know what, Steve Gutenberg, Ali Sheedy, Johnny Five on a farm. This sounds pretty awesome. And apparently, someone else said, nah, let's see what Fisher Stevens is doing. You got to build a movie around that character.
Yeah, that was such a great choice. Okay, that actually was kind of an odd product of the times, that's for sure.
Yes. And that's when Johnny Five joined the gang, Los
Yes.
Patos.
But he was
Um,
also the voice actor was also the same for Short Circuit too, as Short Circuit. So they definitely got him to come back. This is how talented this guy is. This guy is so talented that he was remember Frank the Pug from Men in Black?
mhm.
Yeah, that's the same guy.
Really?
Yeah, that's Johnny Five. Like that's how talented he is. He's so talented that you could never put those two things together and go, "Oh yeah, I can totally tell that that's the same person." And yet that is the same person. So, yeah. Not enough love for our behind the scenes actors.
Very true. Come on the podcast.
Oh man, I would love to have him on the podcast. Oh my god, that would be so amazing.
The
He's got
invitation is now
so
out there.
much. He's got so much to talk about. Flight of the Navigator was also amazing. But I mean, just what a storied career.
Here's what's going to
Fabulous.
happen. John Hodgman's going to call him and be like, I got this invitation for the podcast. And as I was listening to my favorite podcast, 1021, I noticed that they also wanted you to come along. And then he's like, yes, that sounds great. Let me also call my friend Rob Paulson because he should also join us for this mega wadcast. And next thing you know, it'll be three amazing guests talking about awesome things. Um, Universe, make it happen.
Hey, stranger things have happened, to be
On
totally
Netflix.
honest. So I'm yeah, well, there is that. There is that. Which, hey, if you haven't heard, before I get to my number one, um, Stranger Things, Stranger Things with an apostrophe at the end, their ultimate, complete, hey, we're sort of finale season is it's going to be hard. It's going to be really difficult to say goodbye to that era. I I I really feel like, from a storytelling standpoint, it's launched 1,000 different story ships, and man, I got to give Stranger Things a lot of credit for a massive amount of new blood in D&D and Dungeons and Dragons, and just fantasy world building as a credible, viable story option. It's it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. I was thinking that maybe one of our lists at some point, maybe we could veer a little bit into, some love for our online series piece, because a lot of the a lot of series, especially limited series, there's so much effort and so much work that goes into them that, like, each episode is like a mini movie. And I definitely feel like there's some recognition that needs to go into that, but we can talk about that on another time.
Yes,
Um,
we can. Because, hey, Laser Lips, your mama was a snowblower.
I knew you'd have the right comeback. I knew you'd have the right snappy retort. Good job, very good job.
Yes.
And
I,
you
I,
even
I
said it.
couldn't I could not possibly move on without getting that out.
A- and the Johnny Five, the little that crispness, that I'm gonna pretend I'm from the, well, someplace in the Bronx somewhere. I got it. I totally got it. I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah, Johnny Five reminds me of how people really don't know the difference between a Jersey taxi driver and somebody in the Bronx who's just having a bad day. So yeah. Okay. I'm gonna go with my number one choice. Okay, so my number one choice here, and this is, to me, this is actually super controversial because I made it my number one choice for a very big reason, I should say, maybe not a good reason. Um, and I actually sort of feel bad that I didn't choose the first of this series as my number one, because I know that that's where its inception began, but I feel like it fleshed out so much more in the second one. So I'm going to go with 2010 Space Odyssey 2. It was originally, okay, so Arthur C. Clarke, who I absolutely love. If you have never read Arthur C. Clarke, please do yourself a total solid and go read some. It will change your life. But he wrote this amazing book called 2001, and along comes the 60s, and in- incredible, just even to this day, incredible cinematics bring 2001 A Space Odyssey to life. It very much feels like an art house film, even though it's not. But it has, incredible camera angles and really beautifully done cinematography that just even to this day withstands the test of time. It's crazy good. But then along comes the sequel, 2010, Space Odyssey 2. And apparently, Arthur C. Clarke actually changed some of his ideas because of the 2001 adaptation of A Space Odyssey. So there's a computer. His name is Hal, and he is the creation of, um, I think, one of the coolest, oh, I should say, collaborative effort, maybe, um, that's sort of, I guess it begins right with this idea of, um, whether or not, or how do we measure what is uh, being sentient, right? And there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes on in this. And in 2010, Space Odyssey 2, they don't shy away from asking that question. But the big question is, what do we do with all the resources that we have been giving? And how do we manage what we absolutely now understand as basically an alien power? And at the time, and talk about being a product of its time, there was a very over the top and bordering on public hysteria for good reasons. Um, Cold War between the Americans and the Soviets. And there was also, a lot of stuff that had to do with space rights. And I mean, like, it was pretty amazing to live through that time. As a person who did live that through that time, it was scary. There was a lot of really scary stuff going on. But the science fiction that came out of that time was also, like, I think, almost trying to soothe the collective souls of people. And honestly, I can't think of a better way than this sort of epic story about finding life on Europa, understanding sort of that this is definitely something alien, and then having to come together between the US and the Soviets over this uh discovery, I guess, is maybe the best way to say it. Um, and I mean, it's truly just an amazing, amazing story. But to get to the robot part, Hal, who in this one is Hal 9000, is unreal in terms of, I mean, it's just a voiceover. It's a voiceover, but you absolutely feel 1,000% that this entity has human emotions and human feelings and human, just everything, as much as Hal's experience is one of, especially if you go back to 2001, it almost makes you sort of like wonder, well, what's going on, uh, there, because Hal does things that keep the main protagonist in 2001 from doing other things. But in the next one, they wake Hal up, and Hal, it becomes very obvious that he was incredibly conflicted. In fact, not to wax too far on, because I know we're running over time here, but this is one of the things that always struck me about Aliens, because in Aliens, we also get this sort of idea, well, alien anyway, about the cybernetic, um, the androids, and how they aren't able to make the decisions that need to be made because they are programmed to follow directives and orders. And those orders and directives supersede everything else. And yet taking off those protocols, taking off those, sort of safety mechanisms, lead to our the what we I think we would consider to be the more sentient side of human existence. So it's just absolutely astounding. And in 2010, there is something just absolutely over the top with Hal. It Hal is very much a member of the crew. Hal is absolutely the sort of thing that makes the movie work altogether. Not just because it's the throwback to what happened in 2001, but because everything that Hal does is sort of for the betterment of human beings. And in fact, in the end, his final question is he knows he's going to die. And he says, "Will I dream?" I mean, I can't think of, I get all choked up even thinking about it. I can't think of a better expression than that to question your own humanity. And to question your own humanity is to really find it. So I absolutely love this movie. I don't feel like, even if Dr. Chandra was here himself today, he could come up with a better iteration of Hal than they did in 2010. It is just to this day absolutely phenomenal. I never get tired of watching it, and the only thing that stops me from watching it, quite honestly, is the fact that in the end Hal has to give himself up, and it just absolutely kills me every single time. So 2010 gets my number one spot. 2010 A Space Odyssey gets my number one spot.
I have not seen it.
Oh, that was like a punch to the gut, Josh.
I mean, I've seen 2001, so I get some of the points of reference, but no, I haven't had a chance to sit down and watch 2010.
I mean, in some ways, 2010 is an inferior movie. It's an no, I shouldn't say an inferior movie. It's an inferior art experience in comparison to 2001. But 2010 is absolutely, I think, a stronger entry to the discussion of robots because HAL 9000 in 2010 is so much more than they gave him in 2001. He was still really important, but there's just so much more personality, so many more interactions with Dr. Chandra, which really flesh out, if you will, sorry for that, but kind of give an overall rounded picture of what this being is and how it absolutely is thinking about the betterment of humankind. And it's just, I mean, it's astounding. It really is. There's some really great performances in this movie. Absolutely. John Lithgow gives a really good performance in this movie. And I mean, I like John Lithgow in a lot of stuff, but in this movie, he's just like he's over the top. He's really good. He's really 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 good.
You know what
So,
his best performance is?
um what?
Let's see if you can tell from the line that I'm about to reenact. For free?
Okay, that's not the one that I was thinking then. I don't know. For me, my favorite John Lithgow performance is Harry and the Hendersons.
That'd be number two for me. But I was talking about Santa Claus the movie.
Oh, right. Oh my gosh, I totally forgot that he was even in that. Ugh.
We're going to give them away for free. For
Yes.
free?
Yes, 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 yes. Ugh. Well,
Brilliant.
I mean, if you're
Brilliant.
a fan of John Lithgow, this just makes more sense to go watch 2010, the year we made contact, Space Odyssey 2. Because it absolutely is, it's John Lithgow with all of his big bombastic sort of energy coming to the screen. It's great. It's actually really good.
Greatest serious performance ever is the Trinity Killer in Dexter. So
Oh yeah, that's a good point. And Raising Cain was also an amazing movie, which was like, man, the duality in that movie. Whew, that was scary.
it is pushing on just past the 90-minute mark.
All right.
Time to wrap things
Let's
up.
get it wrapped up.
First, you know what? Let's go ahead and rehash our lists. Go through them. You can go first, and then I will follow suit and give us our homework for next time.
All right. I hope it's as exciting as this one was.
Yep.
Okay. At number 10, I've got The Iron Giant. At number 9, I've got Death Powder, the Japanese movie. Number 8 is, I'm sorry, number 7 is Chappie. I'm going in the opposite order. 10, 9, 8, 7. Number 7 is Virtuosity. Number 6 is the beginning of the franchise Transformers. Number 5, Batteries Not Included. Number 4, The Matrix. Number 3, The Terminator. Number 2, Chopping Mall. And number 1, 2010, The Year We Make Contact, or A Space Odyssey 2.
All righty. My number 10 with robots is Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. My number 9 is Space Camp. Number 8, Finch. Number 7, Wall-E. Number 6, Bicentennial Man. Number 5, Iron Man. Number 4, Brian and Charles. Number 3, The Mitchells versus the Machines. Number 2, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And number 1 is Short Circuit. Now, are you ready for your homework?
I'm ready.
Because we've done something like it before,
Oh,
but it was for a totally different era.
all right.
Kind of ambiguous there. What the I believe it was yours. It might have been mine. I don't remember, but there was a point in time we did an episode all about comedies of the 1970s.
Oh, yeah. That was a great one.
It was a lot of fun.
It was.
And, tonight's discussion about how Short Circuit was really a product of its time made me think, you know what? There's a lot of that, throughout
Uh-huh.
film history, products of their time and whatnot. But I didn't want to lean into that sort of what is now offensive that what didn't used to be. It just seems a little too, I don't know.
What
I don't even
movie
know what
that
the
was
word is.
made back in the could today be cancel culture? Yeah, no, I totally get it.
So I figured I would just lay it out there and say, I want to know what your favorite comedy movies of the 1960s are.
Ooh, oh, there's so much to choose. Wow, that's really rich, fertile ground.
It is. And the really, I think, interesting part about choosing the 60s isn't so much, the fact that there was a lot of great comedy, because there was.
Hmm.
It was the fact that this great comedy was being made during a time of so much turmoil in the world, the Vietnam War, civil rights movement, women's liberation, all of that was happening all at once.
Right.
And this is kind of how the studio system, in some ways, handled some of it, and in some ways, completely ignored it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
comedy, I think, is that, as you put it, the fertile ground where you can either pick a brilliant social satire or just something that is just brimming with escapism.
Yep. And honestly, some of the most revered at this point comedies of the 1960s absolutely open arms embraced the most controversial of topics, and so sort of made themselves open targets for what we would consider today to be, wow, this is way too controversial. Nobody would ever even touch movies the way that they did in the 1960s. Super interesting. I think this could be a really good list. I already have my number one movie, by the way. um, this movie came to mind immediately when you said that, so I've already picked that out, and
That's
it
one of
can
the ways you know
only
it's a good list.
it can only get better from here. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Nice.
So I
I'm
hope I
really
even
looking
sound
forward to
almost
this.
smart describing why I picked it.
It's absolutely a really good idea. And I really look forward to hearing what you think might be either controversial or, maybe could have been done a little bit differently or whatever. Because almost every movie that was made in the 1960s really not could benefit, but we'll see it through a different filter, sitting in our chairs in 2024. It's definitely going to look a bit different to our eyes today than it would have then. So I
Star
feel like
Trek
it's
is a
going to be
good
good.
reflection of that.
Yes, yes, I completely agree. Completely agree. I mean,
Looking at it,
huh?
looking at it, it's like, it was a very progressive show, especially for the time, and it still is, in a lot of ways today. But then you could go, "Wow, those skirts." It's all about putting things into the context of the time as well.
Right. Yeah, one of the movies that comes to mind, I won't choose this on my list, and hopefully you won't have wanted to choose it on your list either. But one of the movies that really comes to mind for me is Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? Because although I think the movie itself addressed something that was absolutely necessary to address at the time, we simply wouldn't make that movie today. Because it would just cross too many lines, and we don't see things the way that we did. So, what made that sort of be a little bit funny is basically humor that we have just sort of, no, we don't need that anymore. That's not
Um,
where we're at.
just just throwing this out there, it was remade
Yeah, right. But I'm just saying the
with Bertie Mac,
1960s version.
with Bertie
Yeah,
Mac and Ashton Kutcher.
and it was not very good, by the way.
No, of course not, because it
Yeah,
had nothing to say.
right.
Um,
And Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with Sidney Poitier is probably one of the most. It is one of the most iconic 1960s movies that there is. So
I will say it will not be on my list.
okay then. It's not technically a comedy anyway, but just in terms of like how we're seeing things, I suppose you could group it into. It was pretty funny. There were some really funny moments in that movie.
It'll be easy for me to figure this out because all I got to do is go to letterbox.com, go to the films that I've logged, hit 60s, hit comedy, and bam, everything is ready to go.
You'll come
Give
up with
us
something
money.
amazing, I'm sure.
I already have my all of the comedy movies I've seen in the 60s, I was able to bring up just like that.
Will The Ghost and Mr. Chicken make it to your list? Because I mean, I feel like Don Knotts needs to be in there somewhere.
I
Did you
guess
even
you'll
know
have
that
to
that was
tune
a
in to
movie?
find out. Yes,
Did
that
you
and the
really?
Incredible Mr. Limpet.
No, not the Incredible Mr. Limpet. Now, The Ghost and Mr.
I'm saying
Chicken.
the
Okay.
whole Don Knotts was a thing for a while.
Yes, yes, yes. Absolutely, absolutely. It's- Man, what a moment in time! What a moment in time. I wish I could have been alive back then because it would have been really super interesting. But anyway, okay, I digress. Amazing, good choice for a new list. I am really excited, and I can't wait to see what we come up with for next week. So this has been a really fun time. Thank you, Josh. I had a wonderful time. I can't wait to come together for our next list making venture.
Well, speaking of making things, if I wanted to find some recipes, based on some TV shows or films that I enjoy, do you know where I could find anything like that?
Well, hey, you could head over to moviesandmeals.com, which, as the sole curator of this website, I have been woefully remiss in updating my content. It is not because I don't want to, it's because I just have been falling down on my face with other busy things. But it's near and dear to my heart. There are lots of recipes over there. I promise I will add to them as soon as I possibly can. Moviesandmeals.com. Choose a movie, lots of horror to pick from. Obviously, you know where my love is. And lots of sort of good little ideas about how to create a hobbit feast and how to create some interesting theme dinners. Candyman comes to mind. So, yeah, moviesandmeals.com. That's my website. And I know that there is kind of a little bit of a lull with Wadcast right now, but I assume things are going to get back on track. What's on tap for the Wadcast?
Well, right now the plan is to go live on Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, I believe 4 p.m. Hawaiian.
Yeah, for the 3 people in Hawaii that are listening.
Mm-hmm. You gotta think about the people.
Yeah,
So
represent.
The Wadcast is going to get back on tracks. There are plenty of other things in development. I know I always say that, but with summer coming around, we can actually get things done, and I look forward to getting things done. For instance, I'm putting out a physical zine. That's right, a little magazine. It's called
Nice.
School Paper. It's going to be available in the Jacksonville metro area. Find it $2 a piece. It's not much. You got $2. Show up, buy School Paper. That's what it's called. It covers the local music and film scene, as it covers it by the people in it.
Nice.
So I think the premiere issue, which comes out next month, is going to be a real banger. And quite frankly, I am kind of worried because considering the pieces that are being turned in, I've kind of set the bar really high, and I don't know how to follow that up in July. So wish me luck. Yeah, I just Wadco Media is looking to kind of expand its workload. It's while there's time to do it, and see if this can turn into more fun. That's really the ultimate goal. I know I'm often asked, well, how much money do you make? And I say, don't worry about it because I'm having fun. That's really all that matters. That's all that matters. Oh, God, it's so expensive, but it's all that
Uh-huh.
matters. The fun. So yeah,
I feel
things are
that way about all
happening.
my Tolkien stuff. Like, why am I not getting paid for all this stuff that I'm but no, no, no. When you follow your bliss, it doesn't matter. You are following your bliss. So, good job.
And it's not the money that's important, it's the experience you need.
Mm. Yeah, sometimes money can buy more experiences though, so
Yeah.
don't just throw that out cuz it's also it's up there. It's up there.
There's a couple of Abbott and Costello fans out there that are like, yep. So, with that being said, I want to thank you all for joining us. I know Brandon dropped in for a second to listen, and as always, that's awesome. He's the co-host of the podcast, and hopefully, we will have that list ready for you next week, next time at the very least, because it doesn't. I don't think I'm going to go nuts putting this one together. Not that I did on the robots. Robots was fun. I enjoyed it very much. I'm
It
rambling
was
at this point.
fun.
Jen,
Yeah,
that was a great list.
there's only one thing to do now, Josh.
There's literally only one thing left to do, and that is say goodnight, Jen.
Good night, Jen.
We're named the